pa ti pomogne. Що доле, да протирам се? Добре. Like this Ferrari is just like whee! Oh mate, I feel you brother, I feel you brother. Alright, then we continue forward.
No! No!
we overtook Blackburn after all. Guys, there was some really bad driving from me, I'm gonna be honest. Some very silly mistakes, let's be honest. But it happens, guys, it happens. We got Pavel Labush. Well, his car looks okay. Like, okay. A little bit of damage, but it doesn't look too bad compared to mine. Your friend really hits you, but... Oh, man. And then we went forward. We got this broken Ferrari. Oh, we had a big side-by-side up there, bro. Oh, it was a nice move. Look at this beautiful overtake. Perhaps didn't work. Okay, I'll check it. Look at his move, guys. Look at his move. Man, I'm proud of that. Stop doing last two first things instead of how many drivers are on luck. Like, how many drivers are on net?
DIY well can spray painting parts of the car, nothing easier than that, right? Well, this is my BMW E39 and as you can see here, these sills are currently paintless. The thing is, this car had severe rust holes in both sills. We cut out the old, welded new ones in and went through the whole process. Grinding, filling, sanding to make sure everything was as smooth as it gets. And now it's time for the DIY paint job. In order to paint the car, I have bought a few bottles of primer. I have bought 2 cans of base coat and 2 cans of clear coat. So let's start. At first we're grinding down the spot welds from the sill. And this really took a long time because there are so many spot welds which I had to grind down. And now we're preparing the surface to make sure that the primer holds up pretty good. Therefore I'm using my angle grinder and a wire wheel. Now we're brushing on some rust stop to make sure that there's no rust forming on here. Now it's time to protect the paint from the new paint. We've already sprayed primer on the top of the sill and now it's time to prime the bottom. As soon as I finished with masking up the car, I've started cleaning the sills. And I'm also scuffing off the surfaces to make sure that the primer holds up pretty well. Now it's time for the primer. At first I'm putting on a thin layer of primer, then a second layer of primer, and I'm also doing a third layer of primer. And now I'm doing the exact same thing on the other side. Well guys, we have a problem here. Look at this. It's like, I don't know, snowfall. Wow. So now I'm going to take off everything of the primer and redo everything and clean it with some isopropanol. I've just paid €5 for 100 milliliter. And the other side looks exactly like that. Here, take a look at that. I mean, yeah. Woo. Let's begin with removing the old primer. So, well, here we go again. I don't want to do this anymore. But this time, I'm making sure that the sill is properly clean. So therefore, I've took my time and grinded down the primer. Guys, I've cleaned all of the sills up. I've removed as much primer as I possibly can because there are some spots I really couldn't get to, which is okay because it is holding up pretty good there. And now I'm taking isopropanol, you know, that horrible smelling fluid the doctor gives you on the spot where the vaccination comes in. And here goes on the first layer of primer again. Guys, it's pretty cold here, so today isn't really the perfect condition for painting a car, but I'm going to do it anyways. Now I'm going to remove all of the doors, the fenders, then I'm going to grind down the sills on both sides, and I'm going to put on some primer. So now we are putting the car on the ground and roll it a little bit back, because then I can get the doors off. Let's remove the bolts that hold up the fenders. And there are just a few because I've just screwed in 2 screws I think, and now we're going on the other side. Enough. It is. Now let's remove the doors. And these are actually just held up by 3 screws and 1 door connector. Here I already masked off the car for paint. And now we are masking off the car on the driver's side. I'm actually doing this for my first time, so I'm really trying to do my best here. But if you have any ideas or opinions, please let me know in the comments. Here I'm scuffing up the surface once more because I've decided to prime the top once more. Scuffing up the surface, and now we're cleaning the sill properly, and now we're priming it. After priming, I've took the base coat and sprayed it on. At first a thin layer and then 2 thicker ones. The fact that I'm painting the car is actually pretty rewarding. I'm finished with the paint, and in my opinion it looks so good. Besides of that, you can see that there is some filler in here. But for my first time painting a whole sill, I think it looks pretty good. I've already sprayed some clear on it, 2 layers, so that sill is finished. And the other side too. Well, I guess it's not perfect, but it's good enough for me at least. Let's take the plastic off there and see what the finished product looks like. Oh man, it needs some work. You can see the line, which was quite obvious. Take a look here. That's something for another day. And now we are reassembling the car to see the full effect of the paint. So let's put on the doors and also the camera. Well, and I actually have to confess something. I haven't painted the underside of the sill because I wanted to put on a stone chip paint because I don't want it to rust ever again. But in my opinion, the color of the stone chip protection fits the car so well.
Goodness, those are the wrong glasses. Oh, just got home from work. I am underprepared. Things are going bleakly. Hello, test 1, 2. Test, test. Hello. Test 1, 2, 3. At all? Do I have sound at all? No, I don't. Hopefully it's working, because my streaming computer is not having any sound. Alright. Holy smokes, so the race is 45 minutes. Did one little practice session, that was it. It's gonna rain. It's interesting. Have to figure out rain tires, I guess. Oh, we are so not prepared. Oh.
Low tire pressure. Stay clear of the curbs.
It's starting to drizzle as we pull out of the pit lane. 25-second range, you know. Like grass. Gotta remember how to drive the track. Parcels taking weeks to months to arrive, emails not being answered by Fanatec, and the Club Sport DD Plus not launching. So, what the hell is happening at Fanatec right now? I've addressed this issue a couple of times, including asking directly the CEO of Fanatec, Thomas Jackermeyer, about it, but I think today it will be useful to have a video specifically directed at this situation. But before going there, Fanatec has sent plenty of equipment to me, including wheelbases to test and review, and I also have an affiliate link with them, so this is important context for you. A little bit of background. As you know, post-COVID, Fanatec didn't have supply, didn't have stock for the longest time in very important lines like the CS-LED. In my opinion, low-end or direct drives that are small form factors are some of the more important pieces of equipment that a company can stock because of the wide appeal and how much people can get into it with a lower cost. The lack of stock went up for over a year, almost 2 years, and then in the middle of 2023, Fanatec received a huge amount of stock, and this is where essentially all the issues started to appear and snowballing into a bigger one. Anyways, this issue is mostly centered in Europe, and after the summer, things didn't really get better, and I decided to ask Thomas Jackermeyer about this sim situation in Sim Racing Expo. The issue, according to Thomas and other communications they have sent, it was a change of warehouse that snowballed into other operational issues, stuff in the website that then exposed something that they didn't have correctly set up that created all of this situation. So essentially, it is a change of warehouse that didn't go as expected, that for you results in situations like the parcels taking weeks to months to get to you. Some of the parcels that will have multiple items inside are just half sent, and then you have to receive the items later. Some of the parcels are lost, and for me, the worst offender, because it's more transversal to everybody, is that the parcels don't get a tracking number automatically, or they're not giving to you a tracking number. You have to go to a specific site to get the tracking number to register to a specific site. That really means that if you are not paying attention to it, or really you do not know about this information, it could be very well the case that you have received the parcel, but you wouldn't be none the wiser, because the information that should be given to you is really not given to you on forefront, and then you will not know that it would arrive, and then it's sent back. Even with all of this, from my perception, the issue was getting better, or at least more manageable, until Black Friday, when Black Friday was way too successful. So whatever improvements they have made, at least in terms of response time and whatever, was basically sent back to whatever it was before, and even worse. As expected, no information, and a torrent of new orders that don't have information creates another snowball of a situation where if you don't have any information, you go ask customer support about it, and customer support is already basically piled up with huge amounts of requests, and those requests take even longer to process, and then the circle goes around. It went as bad as their email being full. So that means that any other issues that are not related to orders or information about orders, they also get slowed down, and stuff, very important stuff like RMAs, they take a long to respond. The latest big one coming from Fanatec piling up with all of these issues that they've been having, it's not been a great last 6 months to them, is that the Club Sport DD Plus, the one that is compatible with PlayStation, doesn't have the Sony PlayStation certificate as of yet. So that means cannot be sent, cannot be sold yet, or sent to you yet, unless it's pre-order, and that means whoever done the pre-order has had their pretty penny stuck there. But truth be told, even if it wasn't stuck there, and even if it was approved, it would take a long while to get to you because of all the situations with the warehouse. This last piece of news even got some prime time publicity coming from PC Gamer magazine, so it's now going mainstream and everything. I can understand why they have done the pre-orders for the Club Sport DD Plus. It's likely from experience, and I'm speculating here. They had the best experience with the Fanatec CSL Elite, and most recently with the DD Pro. And from that experience, they could reasonably expect a certain amount of time frame for the certification to be concluded, and some promises maybe from Sony to be put forth. But this time, it wasn't really like that. So in practical terms, to you, that means the availability date moved from middle to December to now late February this year. All of these issues are not your fault, of course. It will be, of course, on Fanatec, even if some of these issues, or most of these issues, weren't really created by them, such as the warehouse or the certification. All of the fault will still rest on Fanatec. And I say this because one of the easiest ways to correct this is to have proper management of expectations, and that needs clear communication from them. I say this because Fanatec can control a few of the variables and can manage your expectations by telling you what is exactly going on. For example, on their site, it tells for some of the lines that are available that it will be sent within 4 and 7 days. This is really not the case as of this moment, so this information should be clearly, explicitly told to you. The other situation with the Club Sports DD Plus could be very easily resolved. Instead of saying now it is expected to be available on the 26th of February or whatever it says there, it needs to have either an asterisk, which you go over the asterisk and it tells you the situation, or tell you on the line below, we are waiting for third-party approvals, and this date might be moved towards the future. This is something very easy to add. This in turn would inform you with the correct information. You'll manage your expectations, and then not so many emails are sent requesting for information on the parcels that are be taking a little bit more than 4 to 7 days, which again it snowballs into another situation where not so many emails are coming in, and then other issues that are also priority, like parcels taking far longer than expected, or the RMAs can be resolved. A lot of buyers are understandably mad at Fanatec, and I've even seen some accusations of thievery or scamming, but I'm not really assuming that because that's really not it is. I'm assuming something far simpler called Hanlon's razor. So essentially, not bad intentions, just having things not properly thought through. Thought through or not, this creates a bunch of issues for Fanatec because they don't have the communications set correctly, that even if they resolve the issue, depending how long it takes, it will create a problem from them that down the line, basically all good fate is essentially burned, all the bridges are burned, and no matter how they try to deal the situation, they could never recover in any reasonable form from that. All of that specter of not answering emails, RMAs not going through, the parcels taking weeks, it will haunt them for years. A good reputation takes years to build, but destroying one, it's exceedingly fast, but the remedy to it in Fanatec's situation, even if the remedy is sour, the best way is still communication and being frontal to customers and consumers about this. You need to say your difficulties front and center, plaster them on your website, and tell the users what is going on. Saying the difficulties out loud in a website would be the best way to go through this. At least whoever comes in understands what's going on. So in my opinion, if you're thinking of buying Fanatec in Europe, you should keep in mind that your parcels may take weeks or months to arrive. Were I in your shoes, I would wait a couple more months until there's a little more clarity in this situation, or I would start browsing somewhere else.
Što je su kutjeva, što se znači?
Не успеав да го спречам нејзиниот бес. Беше во субата и реков да се смири, ама утроа дојдов да зборуваме, донесов чај, погледнав. Ја нема.
Na siti im se javih. Na sekade ja barav. To ja nema.
А каде можела да отиде?
Ne znam, ono.
Martin sent me an email, asked me if I wanted to try them, and said that they were on the more affordable side. Well, that got my attention. Everybody seems to be making pedal sets now which cost €1,000, as if that's normal. Well, in this video we're going to see if somebody can make a decent pedal set for less than half of that. But before we get into the video, the necessary disclaimer. Racegear sent me these pedals for free, so I didn't pay for them, although they don't get to see this video before it's published, and they've got no input at all in relation to what I say. I will also say, as usual, that this is not a product review. There's guys out there that do product reviews way better than I ever could, but what I am though is a sim racer. You know what I'm all about. That's what I do. So that's the opinion you're going to get. So what do we have here then? So we have a 3-pedal set made from 3mm stainless steel. The accelerator has got a 20 kilo load cell. The clutch has also got a 20 kilo load cell, and the brake has got a 120 kilo load cell. So the brake is made up of your typical spring and elastomer brake stack. We've seen that set up on brake pedals in sim racing for years. There's no hydraulics on any of the pedals, it's just springs and elastomers, as you would expect for the pedal set at this price point. So each of the pedals are independent, so they mount to the base plate independently, or you can mount them directly to your rig. So for the accelerator, we have got 3 adjustments. You can adjust the angle of the pedal itself at the back, so you undo the Allen bolts, move it up or down, put them back in to adjust the angle of the pedal. You can adjust the amount of pedal throw with the adjuster in the middle, and you can also adjust the stiffness of the pedal by adjusting the angle of the spring. On the clutch, there's not really much adjustment apart from the angle of the pedal itself with the adjuster at the back, and the same on the brake, the adjustments at the back for adjusting the angle of the pedal. And you can also adjust the pedal plates on each one of the pedals up or down. Now, with other pedals that I've used before, you actually take the brake stack out from the bottom, but with this one you've got to actually undo the middle bolt, take out the spacers and slide it out from the top, which is a little bit different. It obviously saves a little bit of money doing it that way, but it makes it a little bit more difficult for us to change things quickly. But it's easy enough to do. You just take the nut off, slide the axle bolt out, and then it just folds forward. You can just lift the brake stack off. Just a bit of a pain taking out the tools every time you just want to adjust the stiffness of the brake. By default, the elastomer stack has 2 soft and 1 medium. I did get the performance pack from Racegear, but I didn't need to fit that. And I think when you start looking at add-ons, this pedal set then gets a little bit more expensive. And I think that's the USP of this pedal set, is the price. Now, before we dive in any further, there are usually 4 categories that I look at when I'm looking at a product. I look at things as if I'm going to buy them with my own money. So firstly, how do they look? Because if something doesn't look right, you're not going to buy it in the first place. Secondly, what's the build quality like? Thirdly, how does it perform? And finally, is it value for money? So firstly, we'll talk about looks now. I've mentioned previously, I like the look of stainless steel equipment. I like that industrial look. If you've got an aluminium profile rig, well, it just looks right to have this type of pedal set on there. So I think these look pretty good. Don't look as nice as some other pedal sets out there, but I wouldn't consider them to be ugly. But this is certainly a case of function over form. On to build quality, I thought the build quality was excellent. There's no rough edges on any of the pedals. All of the stainless steel is really nicely finished. It has been blasted with something, so it's not shiny. There's nice little logos etched onto the pedals. So build quality, no complaints at all. Although you do get a bit of a little 3D printed controller box. Now this isn't the best, but it's 3D printed, and this is where they save their money. So this uses the mini XLR ports. I don't know if you can see that, it's probably out of focus. So on there you've got the 3 ports for the clutch, brake and accelerator. It's got one USB on there, and it's also got ground on the back there. So that's the only thing where I would say you can see corners have been cut just by the 3D printed box. But that doesn't matter, that's out of sight, that's tucked away. So that's the only thing that I would mention about the build quality. Now, onto performance. Now, I think it's really important when testing a set of pedals is to race with a set of pedals. I could just jump in the rig, hot lap until my heart's content, hit my braking markers every single time. But it's only when you're in the heat of battle racing online, well, that's when you know how good a pedal set or isn't. And you know you've got a good pedal set when you don't even think about the pedals that you're using. What I mean is, during a race, you're racing other people and you're not thinking about where your feet are. You're not thinking about what your feet are doing. It's all happening naturally. And that's what I found with this pedal set. So I've been using these pedals now for a couple of weeks, and any videos in that last 2-week period you've seen on my channel, I've been using these pedals, and I've mentioned it when I've been racing a few times. And I've purposely driven cars which are notoriously a little bit more difficult to drive, such as the Porsche Cup car, the HPD, GT1s, and I found these pedals to be absolutely fantastic. The brake pedal, I would go as far as to say the brake pedal is one of the best brake pedals that I've ever used. The throttle pedal wasn't as smooth as I would have liked it to have been, but the brake pedal more than made up for it. The clutch does what a clutch does. For me, I could press a button on the steering wheel. I don't really care about the clutch. You push it in, change gear, let it out. I'm not particularly bothered about a clutch pedal feeling realistic. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's just a clutch. I was able to calibrate the pedals to a point where I was probably pushing around about 70 kilos. I was able to find threshold braking really easily. I was able to bleed off the brakes really smoothly. I was able to have very tiny inputs just to keep the weight of the car over the front tyres. Honestly, I found the brake pedal to be exceptional, which is not what I expected, if I'm going to be honest. And as I mentioned, I would have liked the accelerator pedal to be a bit smoother. I'm not saying it was bad, again, like the clutch, I'm not saying it's bad. I would have just liked it to maybe be a little bit lighter, a little bit smoother. But there was something that does need a little bit of work. So this is the race gear configurator. If you've had this type of pedals before, this will look quite familiar. So on here, we've got options down the side for writing to and reading from the device, and where you can load your default configs, etc. Links to the website, the wiki and language. Now on here we've got throttle, brake and clutch. So if I press my throttle, you can see the value will go up and down, same with the brake and same with the clutch. Now on the right hand side here, this is where you do your calibration. Now I'm just letting the pedals rest now, and you can see they're jumping around like Billy-O, and no matter how much I play with the values, I can't stop that from happening. And also if I press the clutch, if you watch the throttle output, it actually goes up and down slightly. So there's obviously some interference somewhere with the pedal set that I've got now. I've got it set up as race gear suggests. It's well away from any power sources, other USB devices, etc. So the power cables are nowhere near the USB cables for the pedals. So we'll calibrate them. So we've got to press it a few times and then let it rest and click save. Do the same with the brake. And we'll do the same with the clutch. So there, so that's reduced the value somewhat, and we'll right config to device. So you can see the output is much less than the raw on each of the pedals, but it's still jumping around like crazy. Now the only way I could get rid of this was going into pedal shaping and adding a small curve to the pedals. So if we click on the throttle, we'll have it at 14, and then we'll right config to the device. You can see there it's not jumping around, so at rest that's fine, and you would just calibrate the software or the pedals in the simulator and it will be absolutely fine. We'll do the same to the brake, so we'll use curve 1 and we'll right config to device. You can see there the effect that's had on the brake, nice and still. We'll do that with the clutch as well. Right config to device. So we need a bit more on the clutch there, but you get the general idea. So we've jumped into the simulator, we've chosen iRacing, and you can configure these in here just like you normally would, even though we've set the throttle curve in the software. Here it will just pick up whatever data is sent from the pedals. So we'll click on pedals. One thing I did have to do was short calibrate the pedals. So if we hold the throttle right down and just make a note of that number 32486, we'll just reset that. We'll just press the pedal until we're just under that number, so 32486. I think that'll do. We'll click done, brake, and then we'll just have an auto clutch. It's just a clutch. So now you can see the pedals work perfectly. It's just a bit of a faff on setting the upper dead zone and the throttle curves and brake curve in the software. Now, I did reach out to Race Gear saying I was having trouble getting rid of the interference or the erratic behaviour of the pedals, and as yet I haven't had a response, but it's been the festive period, they might be catching up. I just think the software needs a little bit of work to bring it up to everybody else's standards, really. But all that being said, I was able to dial it out with a pedal curve in the software, and it worked perfectly fine. I would have just liked to have been able to do that without having some kind of fake throttle curve and getting rid of the first 10% of the pedal. But apart from that, I've got absolutely no other complaints about the pedals. Now these are a big old set of pedals, these. I'll put an image up on screen now of these pedals next to the SimLab XP1 pedals. Now the SimLab pedals aren't small, but these things look huge. I mean, excuse the dirty, used SimLab pedals. So the pedal plate on these pedals is 36 centimetres wide, and from the bottom of the pedal deck to the top of the pedal, it's 31 centimetres. So they are a big old set of pedals, but they fit my feet absolutely fine. Nice smooth pedal face, was able to race in socks, ideal. So let's talk about price. Now these prices are before VAT. So for a 3 pedal set, €412. That works out about 355 quid and about 450 US dollars. Then obviously you've got your own VAT on top of that. And Race Gear say that they send this out with a certain code, so you shouldn't have any import duty. So in the UK, for example, if I was going to buy this set of pedals with VAT included, it's going to cost me about 430 quid. I think that is the bargain of the century. I've never tested a set of pedals this good that cost this much. It just goes to show that you can make a really good pedal set which are affordable. So to summarise, I think they look okay for what they are. It's a reasonably cheap pedal set. I like that industrial look, I have done forever. So I think they look okay, but as I mentioned, it's definitely function over form. Build quality, I thought it was really good. No rough edges, the stainless steel was fine. Everything went together as it should do. I just think the 3D printed controller box housing wasn't great, but it's a controller box housing that's just going to be tucked away underneath your rig. So that doesn't need to look startling. Performance-wise, I thought they performed exceptionally. I was racing in the top split on iRacing, and my pace was where I would expect it to be. And I've been privileged to have used some really, really good pedal sets over the years. And the performance of these, well, it was up there. Price-wise, I think they are priced incredibly well. The only downside for me is the software or the electronics in the controller box. At rest, the pedals are just a little bit erratic. I think there just needs to be a little bit more work there on the electronics and the software. But apart from that, no other complaints at all. So I'll leave a link down below to the RaceGear website. Go and check them out. That's not an affiliate link. I'm not affiliated with RaceGear. There's no kickbacks to me. So I've got no financial interest whether you buy them or not. I'm just giving you my opinion as a sim racer. So I want to say thank you to Martin at RaceGear for sending me these out to test and have a look at. Hopefully you guys found it useful. And as I mentioned, just goes to show that you can have good quality equipment that doesn't cost an arm and a leg. As always, thanks for watching. Have a great week. See you later. Cheers. Benny's here now. A practice session, so I didn't take any fuel out. So my qualifying time is actually representative of my race pace. But before we get racing, I want to say thank you to the video sponsor, RaceLab. Now, as you know, I use RaceLab on iRacing, R-Factor 2, and now you can actually use it on Assetto Corsa, which is what I'm using for my overlays in this video. So there is a link down below in the description. If you use the code DaveCam, you get 10% off your first 3 months. I literally couldn't race without using RaceLabs now. Really nice to have a familiar overlay on iRacing, R-Factor 2, and now Assetto Corsa. So link down below. Thank you again to RaceLab for sponsoring this video. So 20 minutes around Hockenheim in the Mazda MX-5, starting P6. This turned into an absolute banger. Let's get on track. Right, here we go then. Another one start. Better than that guy. Nice and easy. Right, up to P4. We did qualify with 30 litres. I just jumped in. So hopefully our race pace will be a bit quicker than what our qualifying pace was. But these two are going to have a bit of a ding-dong, so the leader's going to run away with this. And if we're not careful, this guy behind is going to get some ideas. I've not heard crew chief yet. I think I put crew chief on. Maybe I forgot. He's got through. Right, we need to try and stay with these now. Can't lose them. This guy gonna send it? So I've got traction control on at the minute. We'll see how we get on. I might have to turn that off if we don't get the drive out the turns that we need. These two are having a right good scrap. We need to get involved. Could you dropping that guy off behind? Really, so we don't have to worry about the car behind. That'd be ideal. Yes, that's where we need to be better from those last couple of turns. Hopefully we'll figure that out in this race, hopefully in the next couple of laps. I don't know where the cuts are, I don't know where the penalties are. We haven't got a cut, we did, got a cut one in there, I don't know if you can see that. Have to be careful there. Right, we'll go TC off, I think. That line, the helper's out or kill us. He's flashing his lights, the guy in front.
Olha pra você, como é que é apontado por um primeiro. Eu vídeo les impari, le почти денара си. Не сме да вика на 38 денара има тук. И да ме бърка слушат 2 денара, трябваше и най-вика не с 38, 28. Сега
quicker.
бърка от джемпа, защото паде. Един табак. Така преклопен, толкова сме направено. И со канап връзан. Канапче то свързуват. На нещо да не да.
Трябва ти.
Те ние по-старите.
Just like that, up to P2.
Вие младите за нас старите. Оле,
Сакаше.
много сакаше много.
I think that guy behind's a bit quicker than me though, so
А пък я ми кажу. бабичка напукала количката, вика, добре.
Has he backed off and given the position back? Or?
Она каца вика,
He just needs a lot of
3
time.
колко в финал. А бабичка вика, цяло време носи едно кесе какво от зегин, тако. И вика на продавачка. Те тук, ова ще лезни па.
Right, 15 hours to lose now.
Леле, виго. Да. 3 кила пади носила за нея.
Don't want any more cup warnings, that's for certain. We've got one. I don't know if you can see that on, your screen.
Бех! А гуш! Го най-големата гуш.
И она ке броя.
Абе.
I could do with moving that if I can. I don't know if you can move it.
Да, май, все повече.
Benny's there though.
О, старат се повече. Няма грешка. Я няма за тебе.
Race isn't over. P2 is ours.
Не е изключена, може.
Не.
Hopefully we've got the fuel. Fingers crossed we don't run out of fuel on the last lap. That would be a bit of a disaster. Oh, get round. I felt a little bit better. He's right on our tail now though.
Преска. Драган вика. Свърши. Бъдам джавел. И... За пазара ги има да го не забител, не изчисти. Да, точно. И дума, ама не ме напаги, знаеш, тая ден дане, не знам го. Течето е фитки.
It's out the slow stuff where we need the TC off, like that turn
И кажа ми, какво е работа?
and this next one.
Спа, я
Maybe
комуникация
TC
дума.
on there just bogs down.
Що е да му рече, може да се тера по него. Вот точно. Той ще видео на сликне там, ще притеди видео го петък по вечер, да казвам. Да, така е. Срамота. Я нямам шо. И епа да се среди тук. Сред? Сред? Или шо я?
He's regrouped.
После, не знам, Драган копирува машини, камиони, а не може да дойдеш да не. Он разполага се. И не били изчистени диви депони. А и Драган, не, я и он сме били оно, тук говори. Я викам, сега, я и ти, ама...
So Radislav's got to get past Benny before he gets to us.
Да, там.
As long as we can hold off Benny.
Праките си машините, дека текна. Хубави текна. Така, да.
Whoa, yeah.
И тръбало да кажем. Нека се разправя. Нека да го моля.
Better.
Нека да се разправя. Супер. И преди.
Much better. Much better.
А те къде ще?
Still there though.
Къде Драган до канцеларията, който бивши канцелария.
He's still there. 2017 from the leader. Flying.
Листите, оно майне до ацито. И той е на данни. Той е нещо сестра ми, да се го оценувал, не било, вземам на репа ми се петки, а не го знам, да го познавам, такой път пак. И гледам го, знаеш, не можем да речем. Он е така малко брут, ама с мен
Right, put the flag out. What were you on lap 6?
Я, шо ядам? Шо ядам?
Викам, я да имам на
I
разполагане.
don't want anymore. I'm not
Всеки
keen
ден
on
се
these
трябва.
two guys behind us chasing us
На
down.
разполагане. Имаше и на камиони. И обай пазаеш, но, брате, абе, си майката. Нищо. Ама вземам само на
This is breaking market.
нищо, без викане.
Or did he get
Ау,
sent
пичко
by
на
Vladislav or he's right
ще
behind
се
us now?
разправям до свободар. Ти ако вземал нещо, он само чека пера да дойде да се да бута там. И ста приказа, то ти е такова шпион. Кой го знае, що му домал иде пера на стойчо, един камион,
This guy
пера
behind us got
правили
pretty decent
башкоскопия,
pace. He was scrapping with the
тече
guy in
вода
front
и
of us
ули от
before.
главата. Това е страшна работа. Това не
We
смее
were getting dropped, so there's a good chance that he's going to get by us here.
да сме
So,
го пущили да возят. Бега стойчо. Голем си знае си. Това не смее така, ама... Че така всяка нека така. Можем я... Борба да вода цяло време.
right, we're still in front into the 202s.
Не знам, нервирам се много на работа. Много.
Чакай, кой няма наредно камиона долу? Кой? Директор?
Абе, Драган ги има. Драган.
So he's going to send
Драган,
No
директор.
doubt.
Сидите, прескачате. Никой не те е баба, а кой е вако?
Get my
Кой е
options
проблем?
up as
Аз,
far as
така.
where I'm going to go.
И аз съм бил за лоза бете. Няма го ниде. Това го кажу, да се пати го кажу. Няма го ниде. И има програма, да бъда съм. Тези програмата така и така трябва да се бие. Он си тера по него. И аз що да правя? Що я да направя? Ай, пичко материна да
Какво не ги колетут ли ти ги се караш?
Да. Що я да правя? Ами да се караш джабе. Що ако се
I
караш?
need a spotter. I don't know why crew chief's not
Е,
making
да го
us.
има път.
I must not have
Доста
it
ми
sent
векват
on.
такви работи, май. А Будала ме прави аци папазо. Не съм више почетник да. Безобразна работа. Тебе да дойде на работа, уходник. Добро утро. Слушай ме, майко, съска, шок. Обай, цијако, дойде да му подпишем там за овакво прекалено, терайте, шо да има, терайте. Колко изпозаглавя, па я кривки, бе.
Това пак го подпиша,
So
Не,
that
първо,
defence
не за
works
него.
last
За него.
time.
Гледав,
But it covers the outside this time a
гледав,
little bit.
гледав.
Well, I don't think he's going to send it here.
Чекам, да, не, първо ги спиша. Не, те гледам.
He was gonna.
Кой я не подпишу. Ако си. Пак е се нервирали, ке пцували. Ама баш ме брига. Ще сега.
So he's got that line that I had on the last lap. So under 5 minutes left now. Oh, and Benny's back in. Go on, Benny, lad. He flashed his light then. I hope he doesn't think that I did anything wrong. I don't think he did. I don't think I did that wrong there. I thought that was a pretty solid defence.
Nice touch, I like it. Yeah, sounds sweet.
Right. I'll give it a bit of that back.
фирма така мощна арма. Да се смятам да не разбереш нищо и само
Наравно,
се нежи.
наравно. Гледам го Зоки и он иста песна. И он тръгна не само ovako, a on je samo krivo. Isto.
With alongside, we've got overlap.
Ама него горе го хора, а? Слушай се.
Че видя на Драган.
Was it one more lap?
Да,
5 минути.
да.
I think he's probably going to be a bit more aggressive on this next lap.
5 минути Слава. Чекал е 40 години за това.
Окей, мен Драган не ме нервира. Нервира ме posebno ovo kopanje cijeko, što ja go nego namesti, ki go ispada od rava. Ki mu završi to събранието, я го него намести там. Титрал са го, не е трябвало. Иван копелето ги дия. Ме он нервира, такива. Она дебелата беше тая кат. Знаеш, и край то. Не, що да сбона. Такова не трябва, да го по-далеко такова.
That's going to be a cut warning, surely.
Нервираме, що за да сложим на цијако да работи како што
Benny's
треба,
here now.
јас се разправал со сите. Разбираш?
Benny's here making it 3 wide.
И сега
Don't do it, Benny.
на сите се си
Don't
майка
do
да
it,
сега.
Benny.
Некој. И сега един камион, таа е многу битен камион, разсипан, не знам шо. Разсипан. Не знам шо. Нема да направи.
Sake,
Нема,
Benny.
и ки си трябва. Мис, доста биде. Ки си трябва. Те има тамо и механичари, има и шеф на механичари.
Benny!
Нека начин. Нека начин. Шо ја да правим?
Benny, Benny, Benny. I said don't do it, Benny. I did.
А ти ако направиш
How much fuel we got? 1.5 litres. Whoa, it's got. I'll tell you what, it's going to be tight. I'm
Но
going
ги
to have to look
правят
at that.
на шоферите тия.
I might have to save a little bit here.
Сигурен. Знаеш, оно ниски удари, мая. Това ме нервира, не друго.
Oh no. That's it. I thought we had one more lap then. Jeez. Well, I came into this race thinking, it won't be that exciting. First few laps, won't be that exciting.
Но но си такъв човек, но си се надира.
Actually, very exciting. I enjoyed that.
интерес към тебе
Да,
беше
бе,
подстръкнати и готово, няма
So there were 4 splits for this race. This was the second split.
Него е бавен.
The strength of field was
Това е него бал, нито от работа.
1,526. So Luca got the win. We got P2 and Dodgy Benny got P3. I think we started P6, so we got a gain of 85 on our ELO and 0.02 on our safety
Нема що да
rating.
правим, па.
Somehow Benny
Да
got
се
0
правим па
instant
дека
pot.
се уред. Така ли? Виж ко гледаш. Ево има. Почна да го заебавам. За друго сешо му е било така лесно и почна да го заебавам. Део. Той ги направи, що друго да направи? Моя си сила има от тия над мен и ки рече, кой го е. Па много ме гари, я ки кажа, па он правил, не правил, негова работа. Така ли? Вземани колата. Той пикапо. Но неделя я със Стойчо трябваше да идем до управата на гледанието и ова явува ми се перо. Ке съм видел ли бързо трепало му колата да даде на него. Па навъл! Седа въл! И аз взема, остави колата. Викам ке дом, бързо, развеси се, остави самойте. Кой ви? Стаска па не се сега.
Зато ли югото?
Не югото, но жати пик. Това ти Майя, знаеш шо, гледай, това ти парталите правят. Разбираш? Парталите прави. На комунална хигиена не трябва кола, не трябва камиони, не трябва машини, нищо не трябва, а после те на тебе това. Сега не.
Да кажеш на директора, че па те разбери се, другия.
Да, няма файда. Не правим обед. Разбираш? Не правим обед. Па сега, ако не правиш обед, па я... Ке те гонам.
Чиста сорта си сити.
Исто сега. Юри. Вижте. Чекай да си запишем нещо. За утре. Това кукузило по норбавеца и това тогава кукомо с чо, чекай ти кое свойство ме знаеш и това гледам го пиква и фърля да знаеш, а това нон-стоп съвай.
Че подебава ли нещо?
Не. Тотално нищо.
западната фирма, вика, още не се мачат там.
А преска се видоме съседни. Вика, знаеш що, вика, и на други, вика, това нещо, ово, забавало, разсипано. Не ли на мен, що не ми евидентира ово времето. И на други, вика, така. А някой кажува, она гледаме, знаеш, едно са недоверно. И нормално е, не, човечка реакция, сега вай лаж. Не влезе.
И сега не си таки скразят.
Не, и викам сега, не знам там, ке са оправили той или не, оправено е, викам, добро. И сега нека гледа дъската и ке го терам 100 пичка матери. 100 пичка матери ке го терам. И перо и перовица. Ева матрики ми.
Кой е най-стойче от управата?
Та е млад таков.
Като звъня телефона, вика, ама Стойчо, викам, я помисля, че са тебе. Ама не съм я той Стойчо, аз съм Стойчо от управата.
Стойче.
Викам, добре, извини.
Това ме много нервираш, тако педераси, че ме да, бе. Одак пачо кажува, бе. Това прекарало и марихуани и сващо, пичко ме. Абе, бе. Бърли. Трябва да викам, това педерче да му говоря, майка. Не била. Душичка имам. Не знам, защо ме тъжа ти получи.
За пописо ми ще.
Нека ме тража, какво е. Чекай, бе. Кишия, мисля за вода, да видим какво е много скоро се развижда. Без такова всяка.
Talk TV's Julia Brewer isn't exactly known for being the most compassionate person in the British
Те
media.
sonham.
And the Israel-Palestine conflict, she effectively decided to side with Israel, even though thousands of innocent Palestinian civilians have been killed and 2 million people are facing displacement. But earlier today, she asked an especially outlandish question, even by her standards.
All of these organizations, the Hamas, the Hezbollah, the Houthis, everyone, they are, as you say, they are Islamists. They disapprove of everything in the West. They disapprove of all of our values of, and you know, they're not doing any good for the people that they claim to represent. I don't think any of these organizations or Iran care two hoots about the Palestinian people. They have been used as a really useful, as you know, sort of totemic sort of issue to sort of beat Israel, beat the West with all these years. But when it comes to the point of like, well, you know what? Well, maybe you should take these people. Maybe the solution is that these people aren't in this sort of prison camp that Gaza's been called, even though, of course, actually you see pictures before, you know, not at all a prison camp. But that maybe, you know, that these people should be offered a new life elsewhere. Now, many may not want it, but we have seen, and I was really surprised when I discovered this. My own ignorance, and apologies for that, but the awful phrase ethnic cleansing, I don't like that phrase. There's a difference between, you know, people being killed to be removed from a piece of land than the forced expulsion. This has happened numerous times, and in recent years, since the Second World War, there were huge numbers of people, in their millions, who were moved from lands, moved to basically there was non-stop. Inviting between ethnic authorities, like you're going to Greece, you're going to Turkey, you're going to Albania, you're going wherever. This has actually been incredibly common, and of course we've seen the ethnic cleansing of Jews and Christians in the Middle East without anyone batting an eye about that.
A new life elsewhere. Ethnic cleansing just got a rebrand. After all, we don't like that phrase. It's not very pleasant. Just imagine, Armenian genocide. That was a new life elsewhere. Greek genocide, only a few 100,000 people died, maybe 750,000. Only more than 1 million people were torn from their homes. But let's reframe. Why are you being so... pessimistic. It was a new life elsewhere. And then, of course, there were the almost 14 million Germans who fled or were expelled from Central and Eastern Europe after 1945. Explicable, obviously, given what just happened, but as many as 1 million people died as a result, the majority of which, the vast majority of which, were women and children. No big deal. It was a new life elsewhere. Put a smile on your face. Isn't it strange? Julia Harley-Brewer doesn't like refugees coming to Europe, particularly Britain, but here she's cheering on, it seems to me anyway, the creation of refugees. A new life elsewhere. Unless, of course, you come here to Britain, in which case, it's very bad. Michael, Julia Harley-Brewer openly asked if ethnic cleansing was the answer to the Israel-Palestine conflict, didn't she?
Well, I hadn't seen that clip actually before just then, and I was, when she was saying I don't like the word ethnic cleansing, I thought she was going to try and, find a way of dressing it up as something else. She said forced expulsions. So she thinks that let's not call it ethnic cleansing. Forced expulsions, though, that sounds reasonable, doesn't it? No, forced expulsions doesn't sound reasonable, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And I suppose the argument that's sort of underlying this, I think what she's intimating toward, because she isn't saying these people should come to Britain, because obviously if they came to Britain, then she'd suddenly think that they were chancers and they were just here to get benefits. Right? That's the argument she'd then use. So she is saying, if Iran and Lebanon, if they care so much, they should take the refugees from Gaza. She sort of says, not all of them might want to leave, and then she brings up forced expulsion. Completely bizarre. But what I want to say is that this argument has been made before, right? Oh, well, no one else wants to take them, so why should the Israelis have to tolerate the Palestinians in Gaza? Like, if the Lebanese or the Iranians really care, why don't they take them? Someone else who made those arguments was Hitler. Right? You don't want to bring up Hitler all the time, but I mean, it's very relevant in this situation. I recommend people watch a documentary, The US and the Holocaust. It's a Ken Burns documentary, really good, really powerful. And the whole first episode of that, it's a three-parter, is Jews trying to leave Germany in the 1930s and other parts of Europe, trying to leave Germany in the 1930s, and because of restrictive immigration in the United States and elsewhere, in part because of anti-Semitism in those countries, right? Then they were unable to leave Germany. Many of those people unable to leave Germany ended up dying in the Holocaust. Actually, Anne Frank's family took a boat to the United States but weren't allowed to dock and were sent back. And Hitler used that as an argument. Well, you don't want to take these Jews either. Look, no one wants to take these people. You can't say you've got the moral high ground. I don't want them in Germany, but you don't want them in America. And it's also, I think, important because when people talk about genocide, they say, oh no, they don't want all of these people to die. They would prefer to just get rid of them. And again, that's normally how genocide happens, actually. It's not normally that people have a desire specifically to kill people. The first thing that's normally tried is to push them out, to get rid of them. And then killing them ends up being sort of, oh, okay, well, if we can't get rid of them, we'll kill them. It's just as evil, just as disgusting. But I think you often get a sort of apologia for, what's currently going on in Gaza and elsewhere, to say, oh no, they don't really want to kill them. They just want to get rid of them. But then if they don't leave, we'll kill them. We didn't want to kill them, it's just that they wouldn't leave. Right? That actually is the classic justification for genocide. And, Julia Hartley-Brewer's argument sounded pretty much like it could go in that direction. It wasn't clear to me what she would have as her plan B if forced expulsions weren't possible, because no one would want to take the Palestinians of Gaza, in part because they don't want to be, an accessory to ethnic cleansing. Also, as we've talked about before on this show, if you are a country that takes a really significant amount of Palestinians from Gaza in the region, there is a chance that would be destabilizing, because you've got a lot of people who feel that they've been very much unjustly treated. If they were in Lebanon or Egypt, for example, there would be some people trying to continue the struggle against Israel perfectly reasonably. Right? This is actually one of the reasons why sort of Lebanon got dragged into civil wars, because the PLO were sort of expelled from historic Palestine and ended up in Lebanon. So you have various practical problems with forced expulsions as well as the moral problem. And when you sort of encounter those problems, that's when genocides happen. So I think Julie Hartley-Brewer is on very dangerous territory here.
I have to say as well, Michael, there's an overused adjective, Trumpian, But this was incredible. It was like Donald Trump meets like mid 20th century totalitarianism. I don't call it ethnic cleansing. I call it searching for a new life elsewhere. Like, can you believe? Can you hear yourself? I like to reframe it. It's like the ultimate. It's like an estate agent trying to sell you a wheelie bin and saying it's a studio flat. Like, it's just you're living in an alternative reality. This is on British television, by the way. This is broadcast TV. And you have people saying, oh my god, fake news on YouTube, and kids listening to stuff on TikTok. Okay.
I couldn't help but being tripped up by the very ending of your speech where you said that ending Jewish-Israeli domination would be rehumanising acts for them as well. I just want to ask whether that sort of comment is helpful in the current climate, talking about ending Jewish-Israeli domination. You don't think the word domination has a wider connotation outside that context?
What do you mean?
Talking about Israeli-Jewish domination.
Meaning, are you asking me in Israel?
Well,
Why stuttering?
the phrase jumped out at me at the end of your speech, and I'm just wondering if the trope of domination
No, it's not a trope. It's really real. So it seems not to understand what I'm saying. There is an apartheid regime. No, I'm serious. There is an apartheid regime. It's domination. This is not a trope. This is international law. I encourage you to read the Apartheid Convention because it talks about racial domination. And this is what I'm talking about. It might be a trope into the way you interpret it, but I'm using domination in a strictly legal sense.
I couldn't help but being tripped up by the very ending of your speech where you said that ending Jewish-Israeli domination.
Alrighty guys, welcome to the show. There's a bunch of stuff to talk about today, so I'm going to lead in just a second with Cenk Uygur turning on Fetterman and absolutely brutalizing him. We'll talk about that. We have Trump is broadcasting to the world now in no uncertain terms that he's going to try to steal the election again. We can't say we didn't see it coming because he's saying it's coming. Then we'll also get to DeSantis goes after Trump on the issue of immigration and portrays him as soft. And Obama very clearly thinks that Biden is going to lose in 2024. There's a really interesting article diving into almost how Obama is trying to help out behind the scenes and pull the strings and direct the Biden campaign because he thinks that they're staffed with a bunch of idiots, potentially including Biden himself. And then there's a really devastating poll about political violence potentially coming to America that I wanted to share with you. There's some interesting findings there. So we'll jump into it here in a second. Everybody do me a big favor. Please subscribe to the channel. It helps out massively. It doesn't cost you anything. It's huge help in the algorithm. And let's dive into it. So look at this in Mediaite. What the fuck? Progressive Cenk Uygur absolutely trashes fraud Fetterman over Harvard, Israel, and, quote, turning into a Republican. So I believe Cenk went on a little bit of a tweet storm here. Let's go through what he said. Now John Fetterman is telling everyone how he's not a progressive. He rejects us and is now calling Harvard pinko. What the fuck? This is why people lose hope, because frauds like Fetterman, you work hard to get a progressive elected and they turn into Republicans instantly. Someone should do a poll of John Fetterman in Pennsylvania. I bet his numbers went down significantly after he became the biggest cheerleader for the establishment, biggest supporter of killing innocent Palestinians in Gaza, and a huge backer of Biden. That's not at all who they voted for. Then they say, back in December, Uygur said the populist image cultivated by Fetterman was also destroyed, calling him a mouthpiece for the establishment. So this is all the way back on December 27th. Fetterman has gone from the last great populist hope on the Democratic side to worse than useless. He's now enthusiastically taken on the role of mouthpiece for the establishment, who attacks anyone challenging Biden or the powerful. Counterproductive loser, hashtag fraud, hashtag put on a suit. So, what's been going on with Fetterman recently? Well, we all know, after October 7th, Israel responded to the Hamas terror attack by leveling Gaza and killing massive numbers of innocent civilians and wiping out civilian infrastructure. And in the midst of that, Fetterman pretty much came mask off as hardcore Zionist and right-wing on the issue of Israel and showed zero concern whatsoever for dead Palestinian civilians, broadcast to the world just how much he loves Israel and how much he's on the side of Israel. So that was a kind of a crucial moment in Fetterman finalizing his heel turn. But we also have, he came out and talked about how on the issue of immigration, the left needs to grow up effectively. And they need to realize that not everybody who wants to protect the border is a bigot and this and that. And what was particularly interesting about that heel turn is that there's countless videos of him when he was running for office making a progressive case on the issue of immigration, where he would basically say, like, hey man, this is a country of immigrants, I have immigrants in my family, and these people are trying to come here to work hard and make a better life and pay their taxes and be upstanding citizens, and we should accept people, and because this is what makes this country great. And total 180. He literally would call himself a progressive on immigration in various events, and then now that he's in Washington, all of a sudden, he says he's not a progressive. He literally said, I'm not a progressive. So, you have the issue of immigration where he did a total 180. To be fair, on the issue of Israel, I think he was always bad. There was a very corrupt deal that was documented by Ryan Grimm of The Intercept, where Fetterman's position on Israel, they wrote it up and literally sent it off to AIPAC for approval. And then AIPAC made some edits and sent it back to Fetterman, and then they said, okay, if this is what you want, this is what we'll go with. This is our position on Israel. So horribly, horribly corrupt on that issue. Horribly corrupt. And I think it's just the straw that broke the camel's back. The other thing that Fetterman did recently is he started going after James Carville for not being a sufficient Biden loyalist. Why? Because Carville makes the very plain observation that, I don't know, man, I'm not sure Joe Biden's the best candidate. I'm not sure he can beat Trump. He's kind of struggling and the polls were horrific. And Fetterman thought that was an egregious overstep and basically told him to shut the hell up. Which, by the way, very good intellectual argument. I can't believe he's making me defend James Carville. Do you realize how pathetic that is? That Fetterman has gotten so bad that I have to come out here and say, I actually agree more with James Carville than I do John Fetterman. So here we are. And I think Cenk is really highlighting the breaking point, or the moment that you snap when you realize what's become of Fetterman and how this is a very, very constant career trajectory of a lot of people who go into Congress as lefties. And by the way, how does Fetterman get repaid for this? With all these articles in mainstream media sucking him off and calling him a maverick and saying he has an independent streak. So notice something. whenever somebody gets to DC and then they shift further and further right, what happens? The media's like, oh yes, maverick, glorious, independent thinker. But if it was the reverse, if you have somebody who goes to DC and then they shift further and further left, all of a sudden, the knives come out. And they would not call you a maverick. They would not call you an independent thinker. They would not write glowing articles about how people disagree with him and he doesn't care. For example, Dean Phillips recently came out in favor of Medicare for all. And soon thereafter, there were all these hit pieces because he's challenging Biden and now he supports Medicare for all. And so, he's not even a good Democratic player. This is a guy who has always been a centrist Democrat, always been a right-leaning Democrat. And then now he's running, and on some issues, he's gone a little bit to the left. And they smear him. Fetterman's the opposite. He got in as a progressive. He's shifting to the right. Now all of a sudden he's the darling of mainstream media and the darling of the Biden administration. So, look, Cenk is right. If you run as one thing and you get there and you change it, that's unacceptable. Because you are representing your constituents. You said, here's who I am, here's what I believe in, here are the policies I'm for. And then if you do a total 180, it's like you're a different person. It's like you are not the person that they voted for. And so I find it incredibly selfish, incredibly navel-gazing and self-aggrandizing to suck yourself off and act like you're special because you do the right-wing turn, which is the most common turn that's always done in Washington, D.C., because that's where the money is. And I think Cenk had enough, and he snapped looking at Fetterman, and I get it, because, yeah, you had a lot of young people, you had a lot of lefties who helped get this guy elected, and then he immediately turns his back on the same people who got him in there. Right? And I think there's also a lot of negative polarization stuff going on here too, where the left sort of viciously went after him when he had a bad take on Israel, and that pushed him into the arms of the right, who was willing to stroke his ego and tell him that he's special, as the left was dunking on him. Because of course, if the left dunks on you, then the right automatically loves you. And so now you got all these conservatives and all these centrists and all these goons who love John Fetterman, and he's just like, oh, he's being nice to me, I'm going to go in this direction, right? So, look, I don't really care how he ended up where he is. It might also have something to do with the stroke and the depression and the brain damage and the mental illness. But the fact of the matter is, it's unacceptable. You ran as one thing, now you're something else completely. And this is a thing that takes hope away from regular people. Because if you run as, I'm the next iteration of Bernie Sanders, which is what he did. He endorsed Bernie, he acted like he's the heir apparent to Bernie, he's that kind of a Democrat, and then you go in there and you flip, yeah, a lot of people are going to be disgusted by it, and a lot of people are going to be turned off to politics, and the next time somebody comes along who's sincere in their left beliefs, people are going to go, why should I believe you? Because the last guy who did this turned out to be a complete and utter con man and a fraud. Now, I'm sure he doesn't see himself as a con man or a fraud, but, you ran as one thing, and now you're another thing, so you kind of are that. So, look, I think Cenk is right. That this guy's the problem. It's almost like you'd rather have a centrist Democrat who is open, honest, upfront, and has always been a centrist Democrat versus somebody who pretended like they were with you and then stabbed you in the back and goes to the center. You'd rather have that, because then it's like, hey, at least you're coming as advertised. But with Fetterman, it's, I'm your best friend, I'm with you on all the issues, and then I'm not. And it's like, if you're willing to do a total 180 on the issue of immigration, which you 100% did, what other issues are you willing to do a 180 on? How do we know you're not going to back off of Medicare for all support? How do we know you're not going to back off of supporting an increased minimum wage? How do we know? Look, only time will tell, right? And when we have certain fights come up over certain issues, we'll be able to know. We'll know. Did he also back off of his union support and all this other stuff? We will know when the time comes. But all the evidence now is that you definitely can't take a fucking word out of this guy's mouth seriously. You can't take a word out of his mouth seriously. And, yeah, people are sick of it, man. People are sick of it. They're right. They're right to be sick of it. This is a tale as old as time. And then the final question is it a genuine ideological shift, or is he just following the money, or is it both? That I don't know the answer to, but there's evidence that cuts in every which direction. I'm curious what you guys think. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell.
наркоман не ги познаваме наркомански.
Абе, не, имам наркоманска факса сега, за мен имам майка да се, я може да знам. Така е,
знам, не ги да чу, тегам. Това е цъцо, да глеба, бе, сам не ми да го виждаш. Спаднало да леко на вајде, моля. Абе, цъцо, да ти е. На време си уйде, се. Добре, и ово е виж трети заптека. На време, идат компликации. Началника Николай.
Кой ма?
Пътега за началник Николай.
Не знам. Тя е малко крива къде. Stay show.
$600G will cost $230, and I'm sure many, many people will say, come on man, budget gamers don't need 8 cores, 6 cores would be fine. And you know what? You're not wrong. 6 Zen 4 cores for ultra budget gamers, as much as I hate to say it, would be fine. But they took a third of the compute units out of the GPU. They cut it from 12 down to 8 compute units. That's the real problem with the 8600G. It's not the CPU, it's the fact that that much of the GPU has been cut out.
And then the 8500G.
That's just stupid. And this is where we come into the, do you see the 2 core plus 4 core? This is 2 full fat Zen 4 cores and 4 Zen 4C cores. Still 12 threads, they're hyper-threaded, but the clock speed on these is lower than the clock speed on these. So you're back to a chip with 2 different clock speeds internally between the cores. But it doesn't matter because nobody watching this live stream should remotely consider an 8500G. You should just delete that from your memory. Yeah, it's going to be $179. I don't care. You shouldn't care. And if you care, you should not be watching tech live streams of any sort because you're the wrong. You're the person who walks into Best Buy and buys something because they go, oh, I know what an HP is. Now, sadly, that brings us to the Ryzen 3 8300G. 4 cores, only one of them is a full Zen 4 core. 3 are Zen 4C cores. So that's a 1 plus 3. And both of these are cut down to just 4 compute units. These are for people who don't know what they're doing and they walk into Best Buy, or I would say they walk into Best Buy or Circuit City or Fry's, but those stores don't exist anymore. Micro Center only has 25 stores.
Yep.
Walmart? Walmart sells computers.
They do. That actually would end up in a Walmart.
You know what'll happen? People will walk in. It'll have an 8,000 number in front of it. It'll talk about gaming.
Yep.
People say, well, I heard that AMD has those new gaming chips that are really good. What'll happen is the 8700G will get reviewed, and people will assume, well, they're all about that, right?
No, yes. That people do that.
This is what we call uninformed consumers. But none of you are uninformed. You are all highly intelligent, clever, capable of rational, intelligent thought because you're all here.
Mehdi Hassan is officially out at MSNBC. The host of the Mehdi Hassan show, on for 3 years, announced he was leaving the network this weekend per New Year, new plans.
It's been an absolute blast doing this live show on MSNBC for the past 3 years with an amazing team of producers behind me and with all of you watching at home. It's been a privilege, it's been a pleasure. But as we begin 2024, with an election coming, a war still ongoing, and too many Trump trials, honestly, to even keep track of, and with this show going away, I've decided that it's time for me to look for a new challenge. Tonight is not just my final episode of the Mehdi Hassan Show, it's my last day with MSNBC. Yes, I've decided to leave. To be clear, I am so proud, so proud of what we've achieved on this show, on this network. And I can't thank you all enough for tuning in and for your support and for your feedback. But as I say, new year, new plans. You can continue to follow me online at Mehdi R. Hassan on Instagram, on Threads, and of course Twitter or X. I'll give you updates on what's coming next for me. For now, from me, for one last time on this network, good night.
Now, Democratic strategist Waleed Shahid wrote on X that he keeps hearing that this great interview by Mehdi Hassan of Netanyahu advisor Mark Regev is one of the big reasons that his show got canceled, that it was too adversarial, too truthy. Let's take a look at some of that.
But this operation is not one that we wanted, obviously. This war was forced upon Israel in the terrible attack of October 7th, and we are fighting back, and we will destroy Hamas. We'll dismantle their military machine, and we'll take apart their political control of Gaza. That's good for Israel for obvious reasons. We don't have to live in fear of terrorists crossing the border and killing our people, butchering our children in the middle of the night. But it's ultimately also good, and I hope you agree with me, it'll be good for the people of Gaza, who deserve better than this terrible, authoritarian, extreme Hamas regime.
The people of Gaza are still alive. As I say, more than 11,000 people dead, reported dead, 4,000 children. I just want to pull up on the screen.
Hamas's numbers.
You say Hamas's numbers. I should point out, just pull up on the screen, in the last two major Gaza conflicts, 2009 and 2014, the Israeli militaries matched Hamas's health ministry death toll. So, and the UN human rights groups all agree that those numbers are credible.
Here we have to say something that isn't said enough. Hamas, until now, we're destroying their military machine, and with that we're eroding their control. But up until now, they've been in control of the government. Gaza Strip. And as a result, they control all the images coming out of Gaza. Have you seen one picture of a single dead Hamas terrorist in the fighting in Gaza? Not one. Is that by accident, or is that because Hamas can control the information?
You asked me a question and you said you would be brief. I haven't, you're right, but I have seen lots of children with my own lying eyes being pulled from the rubble.
Because they're the pictures Hamas wants you to see.
During the final episode of his show last night, Mehdi Hassan spoke to Gaza photojournalist Motaz Azaiza.
The first message is don't call yourself a free people, a free person, if you can't make changes, if you can't stop a genocide that is still ongoing since the first day. We are so close to be 100 days of murdering and genocide. So don't you call yourself a free person if you can't stop someone to kill someone else. Because what I witness here, that all the world is ruled by a people that no one in the whole world can say no to them, or they can't stop them. So nobody shall call himself a free person if he's watching another human being getting murdered in front of him.
Now, the real question here that's top of mind and that Waleed Shahid was opining on there is, why did this happen? What we knew was that his show was getting canceled. There was speculation as to why, given how important his voice has become in the wake of the October 7th and the subsequent siege on Gaza. Immediately after that conflict erupted, the three most prominent, perhaps the three only mainstream news Muslim commentators were sidelined. There was never any explanation given for that. They were ultimately returned to their role. So whether it was that they just all happened to have events that took them away from their desks during that week, whether it was just a coincidence, none of them ever weighed in on very public speculation that they had been deliberately sidelined because their coverage of the siege on Gaza was too sympathetic to the humanitarian interests of Palestinians. And now it's not just that his show is ended. Remember, the show was ending, but he was planning to co-host, to do other things on weekend shows, still be a part of the MSNBC family. Now he has decided to leave the network entirely, and it's difficult not to read into that a choice that has to do with his substantive politics, especially as we're talking about this in the context of the recent purge of so many pro-Palestine, left-leaning voices from X just last night.
Right, although we have some news on that. They have been, at least many of them, have now been brought back. Ken Klippenstein, one of the accounts that was taken down, tweeting about it, that he's back, and several of the others. I can't confirm right now that they're all back. There's his very amusing tweet. I would still like some clarification for why that was.
Well, I have some breaking, actually. I actually was DMing Ken as we were setting up for this segment. I asked him, was any insight given into this? He says to go to his Substack. He'll be talking about this in more detail, but here's some breaking from us. What he said was that no reason was given, literally no email, nothing, no terms of service violations cited. It's extremely weird. So I definitely have to follow up to see what's going on there.
Sure, we'd love to have Ken on. Back to Mehdi Hassan, this is going to be another one of those cases where, so I don't know why they got rid of him, obviously. I do have a lot of objections to Mehdi Hassan. They don't really have to do with his Gaza coverage, which I've not specifically been following what he has to say about it. I'm sure I disagree with him in places. If he was taken off the air for that reason, I would probably object to that. I did really dislike his coverage of the Twitter files. He feuding with Matt Taibbi, Li Fong, someone we've had on the show many times, who's not a conservative right-wing lunatic by any stretch of the imagination. Later called out Mehdi Hassan for getting very basic facts wrong about the way DHS content moderation works. I have also personally clashed with Mehdi, which is, all fair. He
so
didn't
have
disagree with me, but let me finish.
Yeah.
On COVID specifically, he said that I was a anti-Fauci conspiracy theorist for asking questions about the lab leak. He looked very dismissively on people who had to talk about that. So I've not particularly enjoyed his things to say on COVID in particular and on the Twitter files, but I think people have the right to disagree and say things I don't like, and he's by far not the sole voice on MSNBC who has a perspective I don't agree with, and I don't, I'm not like celebrating him being taken off the air or anything.
He isn't the sole person at MSNBC who you disagree with, and me either. I have feuded both publicly and privately with Mehdi Hassan. We were formerly colleagues together at The Intercept, and so was
As was
Lee
Lee Fong.
Fong. But he is the only person at MSNBC who might be being pushed out now because of his particular beliefs on this particular issue, which is increasingly revealing itself to be the red line in American politics. A line that people like RFK Jr. are not brave enough to cross. A line that people like Tulsi Gabbard, despite all of the hand-wringing and advocacy for being an anti-war candidate, are not willing to cross. And it is interesting, Mehdi Hassan just this morning actually weighed in on the controversy around Elon Musk in a way that might give some insight into where his mind is at. So to be clear, I would fault him for not coming out and specifically telling us what's been going on at MSNBC. His failure to do so, if in fact he feels like he was pushed out for ideological reasons, amounts to running cover for a network that doesn't deserve it. But I wonder what you make of this. He did tweet this morning about the announcement that Tulsi Gabbard and Don Lemon, but specifically Tulsi Gabbard, are going to be having these Twitter shows. He tweeted, "Hilarious that she's announcing this on the exact same..."
Someone else that you wrote about on your Substack is Sam Harris, and his appearance on Piers Morgan. I wanted to just watch a bit of that and have you respond to it. He's, of course, someone who does not think there's a genocide.
Let's turn to why you actually came on tonight. We had an interesting debate last night involving several people. One was Mossab Bassam Youssef. He's the son of one of the Hamas co-founders who then renounced Hamas and moved away. And he said this about what's going on at the moment in the Israel-Gaza war. Let's take a listen.
Any person who put the religious identity above the highest interest of humanity, I have no respect for this people. The majority of the Muslim people identified with Hamas, supported Hamas. Show me how many Muslims out there who condemned Hamas genocide.
What was interesting about that is that he was really suggesting that the motivating factor behind what Hamas did and why people are supporting them in such big numbers in the Muslim community is because they're Muslims. It's religion driven. Now, you're an atheist, but what do you think of that, of this idea that it's actually really about religion?
Well, I'm going to agree with him. I think it's interesting to note that many of your listeners will doubt my ability to make the statements of the sort I'm now going to make, but they can't doubt that of him, right? I mean, he obviously knows whereof he speaks, right? You can't play the identity politics game with him and say that, you know, he doesn't understand the culture, he's the wrong skin color, he doesn't speak the language, et cetera, et cetera. So let's just you know, flag that particular qualm with what I'm going to say. What I'm going to say is, it should just be obvious to everyone, which is that we have a vast number of people in the Muslim community worldwide, not just in the occupied territories or in Gaza, who are powerfully deranged by religious symbols and their religious identity, which is to say it is the most important thing to them, but more important even than the deaths of their own children. Right? We're talking about a culture, again, I'm not talking about just Palestinians, I'm talking about the Muslim community worldwide in dozens of countries that has produced a seemingly unending supply of suicide bombers over the last 50 years, right? Where we're talking about societies where phenomena that should be impossible are simply to be expected. I mean, literally like rigging children to explode. Just that, I mean, think of how deranging that is for an army or a police force or an NGO or anyone to have to imagine that a child isn't simply a child, but a child might, in fact, under certain circumstances, be a bomb, right? I mean, that is the situation we're in. We're talking about a society, and now I'm talking about the Gaza and the West Bank in particular, where in their schools, they teach 6-year-olds the love of martyrdom, the literal aspiration to die as a martyr, and the hatred of Jews, and many of these schools are UN funded, right? So this is a terrifying situation, which
I'm told, I've not read Sam Harris. I'm perfectly happy to admit that. I'm told he's a smart guy, and I never diminish intellectual achievement where it's real. Just like I wouldn't diminish athletic achievement, I wouldn't diminish musical achievement. I may hate Barbra Streisand's politics, but my mother, who was a connoisseur of music, said she had an incredible voice. I'm willing to defer to that. So I'm not going to, maybe he's a smart guy, but it's just really hard for me, really. It strains me, even as I feel compelled to acknowledge him. From what I'm told, he's an intelligent guy. But these statements are just certifiably imbecilic. First, let's just go through them one by one. He says, well, this guy knows from the inside that these Muslims are crazy. Okay? First of all, he's not a Muslim. He renounced this Islam. He's an evangelical Christian. Secondly, I thought you said we can't trust religious fanatics. But this guy is a religious fanatic. He's a fanatical evangelical Christian. So why do we suddenly credit his testimony? He's a crazy Christian. Before that, he was a deranged Muslim. And the common denominator is he's clearly a lunatic, or he's paid well. You know, and even there, he looked like he was reading note cards. Number two, let's say he was a Muslim, and let's say he was a representative of something. How? On what basis do we deduce that he's representative of 1.5 billion Muslims? Where did we make that leap? He's one individual, okay? And maybe he's representative of something, but he's representative of a powerfully deranged Muslim culture. Then he says that Islam is deranged. It produces a prodigious number of suicide bombers. I think there's a large amount of literature since 9/11 on suicide bombers. Does he cite anything? How many? How many? How many out of those 1 point? He did a steady stream for 50 years. I'd be curious. How many Muslim children are rigged to explode? How many Muslim children? I would like to know. I think that's an interesting number. You say it's somehow this phenomenon is peculiar to Islam. How many people? By his reckoning, I happen to have a lot of Muslim students. They like me by reputation. By his reckoning, every time a Muslim student walks in my class, I should be terrified that he may explode. That's what he's saying. Now, he says that this Muslim culture is powerfully deranged. Okay, I'd like to ask him a question, Mr. Harris, if I may, or Dr. Harris or Professor Harris, whichever it may be. Right now, Israel is committing a genocide in broad daylight, in real time. Nothing concealed, like those billionaires who were successfully ousted, those college presidents, not behind the scenes, broad daylight, no fog of war. Genocide unfolding. We have headlines. Yesterday there was a headline in the Times, 90% of Gaza's population faces starvation. Now this is not starvation because of crop failure. It's not the Irish potato famine. It's a human contrived starvation, which is embraced by the leadership of Israel, the United States government, but also, since we're talking about people who are powerfully deranged, the 1 month into the Israeli genocide in Gaza, the Israelis, there was a poll done, Time magazine, and it reported that 57% of Israelis think that Israel is not using enough force in Gaza. Not using enough force. Now, there's no fog of war. Israelis have a relatively free media, and they all have access to the internet, so they see all the same pictures as you see and I see. They see all of those kids, and they think not enough force is being used. You know what percentage think too much force is being used? You know what percentage? 2%. So, I would say that's prima facie evidence of being powerfully deranged. Now, he says these suicide bombers, they're powerfully deranged bombers. They blow themselves up. Okay, I don't think it's a good thing when people blow themselves up. But here's something. I don't think it's a good thing when you blow other people up either. I don't think that's particularly civilized. People don't want to hear it, but I'll say it. Israel is a citizen army, which is actually a good thing in my opinion. Of course, the religious managed to get ways out, but in general, it's a citizen army. But that's a two-edged sword. You know why?
Isn't everyone militarized?
Excuse me? Well, no, it's a two-edged sword because that means they're representative of Israelis in general. So when they carry out the genocide,
right,
representative of Israeli society.
Right.
Everyone in Israel is either a war criminal or a vicarious war criminal. Everybody participating in that is they brought up 350,000 reservists. Everybody participating is a participant in the genocide. Have you heard about how many resistors there are? There are none.
Very few, yeah.
That's Israeli society. And I don't see, as I said, I'm not going to make a brief for a suicide bomber. However, I don't think there's any comparative redeeming virtue in murdering others from high-tech weapons and murdering them with your body. I don't see, where's the difference? Okay, it's true. During the Second Intifada, there were Israelis there were members of Hamas who had strapped onto them explosives, went on buses and blew up the buses. Okay, that was terrible. I didn't approve of it back then. You know, when I accept, I accept. I'm not afraid to express my point of view, as I did on October 7th, where I said there were atrocities, but I refused to condemn or support those who commit the atrocities. I would stand by my words and let the chips fly if they do. I didn't support the blowing up of the buses. Okay, that's wrong. But how about targeting hospitals? How about targeting ambulances? How about targeting desalinization plants? Is that better? What makes it better, Mr. Harris? No, really, you claim to be a philosopher. I think you got a dual degree in philosophy and neuropsychology. I understand, I don't follow you. Why is that better?
Or blowing up kids.
I have to say, I think it's more cowardly. At least the suicide bomber is willing to sacrifice his. It's not very rarely women. I think there has been women. Is willing to sacrifice his life. If we were going to make comparisons, I think the suicide bomber actually has at least some raw physical courage. Willing to sacrifice. Well, he'll of course say because they're crazy with their religion, which may or may not be true. Communists were willing to sacrifice their lives. Give me liberty or give me death. Was that religion? Was that religious fanaticism? There's a whole wonderful tradition of people willing to give their lives. Remember Martin Luther King, the last speech he gave? Yeah. Longevity has its value. But I've been to the mountaintop. I'm not afraid anymore. So was he a religious fanatic because he was willing to die? So you can say, no, that's not the same because the Hamas and the other fanatics, they blow up innocents. Really? Fine, I agree with that. Now, what do you think is going on in Gaza? Hospitals, where Human Rights Watch concluded that there was no military justification for the targeting of hospitals. Who are you targeting in hospitals? You're talking about targeting the lame, the sick, the nearly dead, and the newborn. That's who you're targeting in hospitals. That's okay? That's okay? You know, it kind of like, it bewilders you how a reputedly intelligent person can say things which are just so transparently stupid.
Hello, Elon. My heart goes out to the hostages and the families of those hostages.
Thank you.
How many of the 136 hostages currently being kept in Gaza does the government believe are still alive?
Thank you for your support and sympathy. The hostage issue is a source of incredible pain and frustration for the Israeli people. We're a very small country, so 250 hostages means everyone knows at least someone who had someone stolen from them, and we are sick with worry for the fate of those people still trapped in the Hamas terror dungeons. Of the 136 hostages still trapped, we believe that around 24 of them have since been murdered by Hamas in captivity, and it is now holding on to their bodies for a ransom.
It's just heartbreaking. Every night when I lay my head on my pillow, all I visualise is the families of the hostages and those poor hostages that are currently being kept in tunnels, young girls that have been raped, people that have been tortured. It's just unbearable. And I'm finding that people are forgetting to talk about the hostages, and it's very important for me to keep that alive, to keep reminding people about those hostages. It's not just about what's going on in Gaza and the destruction because you're trying to get to Hamas. There are real people that are suffering every single night, and we need to think about them. My heart is breaking every day.
Elisa, that's well said.
You're
And
right.
one of the reasons for going in to Gaza was to get those hostages back. As of December the 22nd, only one hostage has actually been rescued, as opposed to either being released through a prisoner exchange or any other method. Has that number increased?
we have 110 hostages who have been released, mostly as a result of the hostage release pause that we agreed with Hamas, where in exchange for giving it a break in the fighting, it released hostages. Now, we hope that that framework would continue and we would be able to get at least all of the women and children out. Unfortunately, on December 1st, Hamas decided to stop releasing all the women and children and to resume rocket fire at Israel. And everyone in Israel is really sick with worry for the hostages. We're talking about intensely vulnerable people. Certainly the women, given everything we know about the Hamas sexual atrocities. Elderly people without their medication. I spoke just the other day with Rachel Goldberg, an incredibly brave woman who has been lobbying for her son Hirsch, who was abducted from the Nova Music Festival after Hamas death squads threw grenades into a roadside bomb shelter, killed most of the young people there, and blew his, I'm sorry to be too graphic on Drive Time Radio, blew off his left arm from the elbow down, and they've been denied access to the Red Cross. And tragically, we had the president of the Red Cross here in Israel, and the Prime Minister said, you need to pressure Hamas to get access to the hostages, and she shuffled in her seat and said, that's not going to work. And you know what? We don't think that's good enough. We think the international community needs to put more pressure to make sure that those hostages are released not only immediately and unconditionally, but that they get access to the Red Cross and medical
But does
treatment.
Israel know where these hostages are? As I say, only one hostage has actually been rescued, which is part of Israel's reason for going in. And of course, there was this incident before Christmas where IDF soldiers killed 3 of Israel's own hostages who were reportedly running at them saying help in Hebrew, half naked, waving white flags.
Yeah, really a tragic incident that shocked the whole country. I wish there were an option for the army to swoop in with special forces and grab the hostages, as Israeli special forces have done in the past with hostage crises. Unfortunately, Hamas has spent a very long time preparing for this, and we know that those hostages are either hidden inside tunnels that will be booby-trapped, or, and this is really shocking and is coming out from the survivors of the Hamas terror dungeons, we know that many of the hostages were actually held inside civilians' homes. As difficult as this is to believe, we know that they were being held in ordinary people's houses, and so they're spread out across the Gaza Strip. Hamas is making it very difficult to reach them, and that's why our strategy now is to put unrelenting military pressure on Hamas until it begs for another breather and is willing to release the hostages. Standing by and simply asking nicely or sending Hamas an email to release the hostages was never an option.
All right. Elisa, thank you for the call. Dave's in Liverpool. Dave.
Yes, hello. I'd like to ask Mr. Levy that in light of the thousands of men, women, children, babies who have been killed in Gaza, how does he think that Israel is going to secure a lasting peace? Because you do think all those people who have lost, family members or had their homes destroyed would be seeking some sort of retribution against Israel. So I just don't see how you are really securing the safety of people in your country by your actions.
Is there a question, Dave?
Well, yeah, the question is, how do you think you're making Israel more secure when you're making more people have a vengeance against you?
Back to the point I was making about the attempts to try and de-radicalise that part of the world. Mr. Levy.
First of all, you're right, the humanitarian situation is deeply upsetting. Every civilian casualty is a tragedy. Civilian casualties are unfortunately a tragic feature of every war, and they're a tragic feature of this war, which Hamas started, which Hamas launched with the October 7th massacre, and is fighting out of densely populated areas where it is deliberately hiding itself under people's homes, schools and hospitals. And everyone who has been killed would still be alive if Hamas had not started this war, and if Hamas simply surrendered, laid down its arms, handed back the hostages, and allowed us to move towards a future of peace and prosperity. But on October 7th, Hamas invaded Israel. Hamas brutally massacred 1,200 people, they burned whole families alive, and they abducted 250 hostages. And at that point, we faced a choice. To leave the hostages in Gaza, abandon them, and leave in place the terror regime that tells us it wants to do it again.
The mission to go and
or
get
to
them
destroy.
hasn't been a success, has it? If only one hostage has been returned via rescue, it's not been successful as an operation to go in and get them out.
we have succeeded in securing the release of 110 hostages as a result of the military pressure that we placed on Hamas. And what we are doing now is destroying the Hamas terror state so it cannot hurt our people again. Because the sad fact is, we want this war to be over. We want it to go away, and we want all of our friends who are in reserves, and there are parents in this country who can't sleep because their children have left their ordinary day jobs or in reserves. We want them home, but we know that this war can't end until Hamas is destroyed, because otherwise Hamas will attack us again, as it tells us repeatedly that it wants to do. We're in a situation now where there are no good options, only less bad options.
I think we have to make our case very vigorously, as I do. I mean, when I meet, for instance, South African foreign minister or talk to them, I would say, look, of course, I want this conflict to end as soon as possible. I don't want to go on for a moment longer than necessary. But a ceasefire to work has got to be sustainable. That means you can't have Hamas in power, able to launch rockets, not releasing hostages. That has got to be dealt with. And I think you get...
On
yes.
that, Foreign Secretary, do you believe that military intervention can defeat Hamas?
I think that what the Israelis are trying to do is they are trying to get rid of Hamas's ability to launch further attacks on Israel. I think you can do that. And one can disagree, and I would have differences with the way they've gone about it. Can you defeat an ideology through armed intervention? No, defeating an ideology is going to take a lot of other things, including progress towards a political solution to show that politics can work and deliver things. But I think if you take the argument there's nothing more that can be done militarily, you just have to freeze things where we are now, you've then got to make an argument, well, how do you get the remainder of Hamas out of Gaza, get rid of the rocket launchers, get rid of my challenge to those from the Global South or friends in Arab states is to say, okay, there's a ceasefire tomorrow, how do you get rid of Hamas's capacity to launch more rockets?
How will you know when that moment has come as British Foreign Secretary? And is it your hope that the UK will be voting for a ceasefire at the UN in the near future?
I would hope that we'll be voting. I mean, what we did is we defined what we wanted as a sustainable ceasefire. The Prime Minister said that at Prime Minister's questions, and within a few weeks that was adopted by the UN in Resolution 2720 with unanimous, well, not unanimous agreement because the United States didn't vote in favour, but without a veto. So that's our position. Yes, I look forward to the moment when this conflict is over. And of course, we spend a lot of time asking what Israel should do next to bring this to an end, to finish. We should also spend a nanosecond saying if Hamas wanted, they could end this tomorrow. They could lay down their arms. They could leave Gaza. They are the ones prolonging this conflict in many ways.
You've warned against an unsustainable ceasefire that quickly collapses into further violence, but there's a strong feeling, I think, in the international community and in the public that the longer violence continues and the further peace is away, that we're going to struggle to get to peace.
I don't disagree with that. We don't want this to go on. No, what I'd say first of all, I would be in favour of humanitarian pauses, including right now. I mean, let's have another pause to try and get hostages out and to get more aid in. I'd be happy for us to do that now. What I'm saying about sustainable ceasefire is it does need Hamas to no longer be capable of launching attacks into Israel. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. And I hope that moment comes as quickly as possible.
Francis, just to take back for a moment, what is the UK's current legal position on whether or not Gaza is occupied?
Our position is that Israel is fighting a campaign against Hamas. We have to check regularly whether that is in compliance with international humanitarian law and assess that. I don't think Israel regards itself as an occupying force, but whether that is correct I would want to take legal advice, because this comes to this issue about aid, where I think Israel needs to do more, a lot more, to get more aid into Gaza, which perhaps we can come on to.
Forgive me, we know that Israel does not consider itself to be an occupying power, but British law currently does consider Gaza to be an occupied power. Can you, an occupied territory. Can you just confirm that on the record?
I don't know the precise legal definition of that. I'll have to go back and check.
Philip? I think we all know that the Foreign Office does know what the official legal position is.
When we describe the territories as the occupied Palestinian territories, but
that's a different question.
That's a descriptor.
Yes.
Yeah.
They should give you a piece of written advice on the legal position.
I think what the chair's asking is, do we consider Gaza to be occupied militarily at the moment? Is that what you're getting at?
I'm asking for the British government's legal definition, whatever they consider to be the terminology of that you're occupied, because as I understand it, there is no question that in law, under British law and according to the UN Security Council Relation 22334, on which we have based our legal position, Gaza is an occupied territory, and therefore from that, Israel does have obligations as an occupying power, whether or not they consider it to be or not. British law does state that, and I would consider it to be quite fundamental that we knew exactly from what premise we were operating when
Well,
engaging
as you know, we refer to them as the occupied Palestinian territories, but obviously Gaza was left by Israel. But I think the question you're asking now is what Israel's done, is that technically an occupation, and therefore do they have legal obligation? The point I would make is, look, whether or not they are de jure occupying, they are de facto occupying Gaza, and therefore, when it comes to this issue of aid delivery, we need them to do more. At the moment, we're at about 150 trucks a day getting into Gaza. We need to be closer to 500. Every day that we're not closer to 500, we're going to have more people going hungry, we're going to have more people getting disease. There is a danger of there being really widespread hunger. At the moment, something like 90% of Gazans are getting less than one meal a day, and so I've set out with the Israelis a whole set of things that could happen, that they could do that would make a real difference. You know, make sure Kerem Shalom is open 7 days a week. Make sure that Nitzana checking point is open 24 hours a day. Make sure that aid convoys that are coming across Jordan have unhindered access into Gaza. Look at opening the port of Ashdod so aid can arrive by sea, go from Ashdod, either into Kerem Shalom or even better go into the Erez crossing. Crucially, none of these things will work unless inside Gaza
minuta da izvadite saobraćaj i tablice na vaše ime.
Gledaj ovo đubre od creva što puče.
Evo šta se kupio. Baštensko crevo. Nastavljamo dalje. Srbija, brale, moraš da se snađeš.
Chemical terminus arrival.
Ovaj put imamo poručen Audi RS4 i naš klijent ima, da kažem, specijalne zahtjeve u smislu boje auta, paketa opreme. Idemo, znači, da preuzmemo rentakar i naravno do salona gdje se nalazi salon. I evo, upravo smo stigli. Zverka je tu. Sad ćemo da je pregledamo celo. Znači prvo što radimo za provjeru auta, to je eksterijer, vizualno, da li su svi zazori na svom mjestu. Evo ovaj prednji kraj, znači vidi se da je sve na svom mjestu. Oko farova, maska, evo i na drugoj strani. Također, kako je bolesno to krilo, to nije normalno, prosto mi odlači pažnju. Ovi zazori između vrata, dole se vidi da je, pošto je u oglasima napisano da je kapristo izduv, tako je. Merili smo znači i debljinu laka, pošto je debljina laka fabrička mera od 80 do 160 mikrona, Znači to je neka tolerancija, ovdje je nekih 125, 130, što znači da je fabrička boja. Dalje, isto vizualno možemo da vidimo, znači oštećenja na evo prednje levoj felni, evo to može da se vidi ovdje. Kočice su potpuno nove, gume su zadnje 2018. godište, prednje su također davno 2019. godište, sva stakla su 2012. Sem prednje šofer šajbne, nije fabrička. Također provjeravamo i panoramu jer kod Audija je mana ova keder guma koja zna da ispuca. Fabrički je zatamljen jer imate slovo V. Znači ne mora da se atestira, nisu folije, ovo su neka blaga oštećenja od kamenčića. U suštini taj vizualni deo je perfektan. Sada možemo da pređemo na unutrašnjost auta. Na volanu apsolutno nikakva oštećenja. Na samom sedištu, znači ima blago ovdje oštećenje, vidite to, i ima ovdje blago. S obzirom da su ovi bubrezi jako izbačeni, ovo je apsolutno nikakvo oštećenje. Gore nam je znači dupla panorama, ručica menjača, koža, sve u izvanrednom stanju. Paket opreme Audi Exclusive sa karbon detaljima. Sedišta su tako moćna, tako dobro odrađena, ovo je fantazija. Jeste da imaju mehaničko pomeranje, pozadi isto grejači. Gledat ćemo ivice od vrata, da li ima tragova da je farbano. Ovdje se pojavljuje, evo vidi se, lak, što znači da su ova vrata farbana. Što se tiče samog motora, što mogu da pogledam, to je vizualno. Ne mogu da uđem u motor i menjač, naravno. Vizualno nema nigde nekog curenja ulja, znači nekih naznaka jeste masno ovdje na usisima, ali dobro, to je sasvim normalno, to je sportska mašina. Radi mirno. Sada ćemo da ga zakačemo na launch dijagnostiku koju imamo, da vidimo da li ima nekih grešaka. To ne mogu da pokažem zato što snimam telefonom, a dijagnostika je na telefonu, ali ću screenshotovati ako ima neke greške. Garantuje da je accident free, znači da nije imao udesa, ali naravno to ne znači da auto nije negde očišan ili nešto farbano na njemu. Kao što sam uočio da je jedan far zamenjen, da je prednje desno krilo farbano i vozačeva vrata farbano. Mada rekao je da će pismeno garantovati za auto, pošto u Srbiji ima naravno Audi oficijalnih servisa, tako da ta garancija će važiti i u Srbiji. Sada pregledamo servise. Poslednji servis ovdje u Švajcarskoj koji je rađen je privatna garaža 25.11.2021. na 155.000, ulje, filteri i same kočice. To znači prešao je za godinu dana 20.000 km. Vreme je i za mali servis. Što se mene tiče, ja bih ga kupio sigurno. Ipak je to zadnja atmosfera od Audi. Nema greške. Ostaje onaj posljednji čin, a to je pregovaranje oko cene. Onda zovemo našeg klijenta, obaveštamo ga o svemu što smo mogli da vidimo i čekamo njegovo zeleno svetlo da li će kupiti ovaj auto ili ne. Pozdrav svima, evo ponovo sam nalazim na Ciriškom aerodromu, znači dobio sam zeleni signal da se kupuje RS4, iskreno nisam spavao celu noć, jako sam uzbuđen zato što ću ga voziti od Ciriha do Srbije, sada krećem u podzemnu železničku stanicu i imam direktnu liniju do mesta gde se nalazi RS. Malo pešačenje, neće da škodi naravno. Pošto Audi trenutno nema tablice s kojima mogu ja da vozim, idem do zgrade gde mogu da mi izdaju probne tablice sa kojima ću voziti auto do Srbije. Prodavac mi je dao lično njegov auto s kojim ću otići da preuzmem te tablice. Sada ćete vidjeti koliko koštaju, kako se vade, šta je potrebno i tako dalje. Idemo sa pasarelom. Celih 6 minuta da izvadite tablice, to je saobraćaj i tablice na vaše ime. I evo ovdje stoji do kada važi, znači 30.11.2022. Do tada važe ove tablice i osiguranje za ovaj auto. Cena ovih tablica je 213,40 franaka, znači nekih 220-30 eura. I lep broj sam dobio. 23478. Ova nalepnica ovdje nam je oznaka da važe za cijeli 11. mesec u 2022. godini. iskoristio sam priliku kad sam već u Švici da kupim za Ferrari FF na kojem treba da radim servis, filtere. Morao sam da kupim 2 filtera za ulje, filter kabine i 4 filtera za vazduh. Zašto? Zato što iznos svih ovih delova je 670 franaka, a Ferrari ne prodaje delove ispod 500 franaka. Znači morao sam da dupliram filtere za vazduh i za ulje i jedan za kabinu, to je klimu. Sad krećemo do garaže od mog prijatelja, pošto ću tu zameniti ulje i filtere pre nego što krenem ujutru za Srbiju, jer auto je prešlo skoro 20.000 sa ovim uljem koje je sad u motoru, a ne bih želeo da ga vozim sa tim uljem dole, tako da sam to sve već kupio. Ulje za motor, filter za ulje i filter kabine. Filtere za vazduh neću sada menjati, to ću dole zameniti kada dođem u Srbiju. Bolest.
Gledaj ovo đubre od creva što puče, vidim neki dim se pojavi. Pilete!
Neverovatno kakav peh odmah sa Audijem. Prelinu crevo iz posude, plastično naravno, đubre, to je ovo crevo, je puklo, jer je verovatno istrulilo i tu je antifriz počeo da curi i to baš. Srećom pa sam stao ovde blizu ovog džamba, pa je tu imalo svašta od nekih alati. Evo šta sam kupio, jedna klešta, da bih mogao da skinem ovu šelnu koja se pritisne pa se izvuče. Baštensko crevo, drugo nema, armirano je, pa ćemo da pratimo šelne, ako ne budu mogle ove koje su fabričke, skalper i destilovana voda da bi mogao da dolijem antifriza, možda neki pola litra. Vidi se dole, jeste palo ispod minimuma, ali se vidi dole antifriz. Kakav peh sa Audi. Srećom pa se to desilo ovde na početku. Evo rešenja. Vratio sam fabričke šelne koje su odlično stegle crevo. Sprovao sam, znači kuda ide i ovo fabričko. I ovde sam stavio fabričku šelnu. Ocekao sam ovo original. Srećom vidio sam na vreme taj blagi dim. Čekamo sad da izbaci ovde ovaj povrat da bi se ozračio sistem. Još uvijek je prazan. Evo dobili smo antifriz. Provukao je taj vazduh, što je najbitnije. Nema ga više. Funkcioniše sve. Nastavljamo dalje. Srbija, brale, moraš da se snađeš. Ne vredi. Evo, posle nekih 10 km stao sam da proverim da slučajno crevo nije negde se nadulo, pošto je ovo apsolutno prva pomoć, ne neko trajno rešenje. Dok ne dođem do drugara do garaže, onda ćemo staviti originalno crevo, nadam se da ima ovako neko crevo, da ćemo da vidimo da li ima pritiska. Nema nikakvog pritiska, što znači da uzrok što je puklo ovo crevo koje je bilo fabričko je to što je saturilo plastik. Nema mehura, nema pritiska, sve se ponaša normalno. Nastavljamo dalje. Evo, našli smo jednu prodavnicu autodela, da uzmemo to crevo 8 mm i da ga namontiramo. Cena metar i po je 8,6 franaka, znači nekih 9-10 eura. Baštensko crevo. Bacamo. Pustio sam i malo duže da ga ne bi izlomio. I eto kako može da se reši RS4 na ulici. Srećom pa ga nisu stegli, ja. 9,5 litara staje. Taman će pola litra da pretekne. Sad lagano krećemo za Srbiju. Upravo izlazim iz Švice, ulazimo znači u Austriju. Čim uđem imam određenu benzinsku stanicu gde sipam benzin. jer je dosta povoljniji nego u Švici i tu ćemo pratiti koja je prosječna potrošnja na autoputu. 1,73 benzin, 40,5 litara, 327 km. I pol litra, 348 km, 12,2, a Bosch pokazuje 11,2. Treća dopuna goriva u Beču, kilometraža 274, rešio Audi do kraja da zeza i to je. Šus plek, počeo da visi, da kači. Morao sam kompletno da ga skinem. Više nema šus plek. I što se mene tiče, neće više ni da ga ima. Malo sam ruke iscepao, ali dobro. Ne dam se, idem do kraja. Upravo ocarnjen, krećemo za Kraljevo. 51,5 litar, 460 km, krajnje zadovoljavajuća potrošnja. Ono što gubite sa Capristo izduvom, to je ova rezonanca koja je baš jaka na 140, evo tempomat. Ne znam sad koliko možete to da čujete na kameri, ali je baš jaka rezonanca. Znači na 160 se ne čuje, na 120 se ne čuje, ali na 140 ima baš jaku rezonancu. Trenutno na benzinskoj stanici, znači evo ovdje sam u Kraljevu, napunio sam pun rezervoar i sada da ispratimo koliko je potrošnja u čistom gradu sa RS-om. Znači 39,12, kilometraža 185, kad se preračuna 21,1 je potrošnja u gradu, režim vožnje 50-50, što znači da bord laže za 3 litra u gradu. Malo ih je teže izvući.
After Israel targeted the Jenin refugee camp in the West Bank, the BBC finally gave an Israeli politician a tough interview. This is Anjana Gajil speaking to former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett.
We're joined now by the former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett from Jerusalem. Good evening and thank you for joining us.
Good to be here, Anjana.
First of all, the Israeli military are calling this a military operation, but we now know that young people are being killed, 4 of them under 18. Is that really what the military set out to do, to kill people between the ages of 16 and 18?
Quite the contrary. Actually, all 11 people dead there are militants. The fact that there's young terrorists that decide to hold arms is their responsibility. Look, at the end of the day, over the past year or so, we've had over 50 Israelis murdered, in many cases by terrorists that were sent from Jenin camp, armed, trained, and sent to kill and murder Israelis in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and across Israel. And Jenin has become an epicenter of terror. So we, unfortunately, had to enter this hornet's nest of terror and neutralize the terror. Otherwise, they're going to continue killing us. So in fact, all the Palestinians that were killed are terrorists in this case.
Terrorists, but children. The Israeli forces are happy to kill children.
You know, it's quite remarkable that you'd say that, because they're killing us. Now, if there's a 17-year-old Palestinian that's shooting at your family, Anjana, what is he?
Under your definition, you are calling them terrorists, the UN are calling them children.
I'm actually asking you, what would you call a 17-year-old person with a rifle shooting at your family and murdering your own family? How would you define that person?
We're not talking about that. The UN has defined them as children. The UN has defined them as children, and we know that 4 people between the ages of 16 and 18 have been killed in this targeted attack. Let's not forget it's a targeted attack. The Israeli forces are going in looking
these are
for these
terrorists.
people.
I'm missing something. You know, a 17-year-old terrorist can murder civilians. There's a fundamental difference between what they're doing, which is explicitly and deliberately targeting civilians, and what we're doing, which is targeting terrorists. That's exactly the opposite. We're doing the right thing, they're killing civilians, and the fact that you're creating this moral equivalent, or even worse, I think it's unacceptable.
That was a tough interview, which I think is warranted when speaking to a politician who supports a 50-year-long illegal occupation. But the nature of the questioning meant the BBC would soon find itself under attack, including from the Board of Deputies. So they released this statement. We are appalled by comments made by a BBC presenter during an interview with former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett. The comments made, including the charge that Israel forces are happy to kill children when discussing armed terrorists under the age of 18, is simply disgraceful. This is a clear breach of the corporation's own editorial guidelines, and we will be contacting the Director General personally to protest in the strongest possible terms. And the BBC buckled. So they've released this statement. BBC News has received comments and complaints concerning an interview with Naftali Bennett broadcast on the BBC News channel about recent events in the West Bank and Israel. The complaints raised relate to specific interview questions about the deaths of young people in the Jenin refugee camp. Across the BBC's platforms, including our news channel, these events have been covered in an impartial and robust way. The United Nations raised the issue of the impact of the operation in Jenin on children and young people. While this was a legitimate subject to examine in the interview, we apologise that the language used in this line of questioning was not phrased well and was inappropriate. Well, the Palestinian ambassador to the UK has now responded to that apology. He tweeted this. So far, Israel has killed 35 children this year, and 160 Palestinian children are currently in Israeli prisons. Yet the BBC has to apologise for asking about that. And the BBC doesn't have to apologise for describing Palestinians as terrorists. Now, I think that's a really, really good point by the ambassador. We've had him on the show before, very, very articulate guy. Because in that clip, you might say, is the Israel army happy to kill children? You know, is somewhat inflammatory. It's a question, by the way, so often you put questions in inflammatory terms to elicit a response. But so is it inflammatory to just call Palestinians terrorists, right? Which the host also did. And I haven't said I got called up for that. I don't see any apology from the BBC. Now, you might be saying, why is it inflammatory to say these people are terrorists if they are militants? And, you know, they were found with guns. I don't know if they were found with guns, but even if they were militants, let's say. And the reason it's not uncontroversial to call a Palestinian militant a terrorist is because if you are under a legal occupation, then you do have the right to resist that occupation by any means necessary, right? Still, there's, you can commit war crimes even if you're under occupation, right? So it doesn't give you carte blanche to do anything. But if what you do is take action against an Israeli soldier, for example, you're going to get called a terrorist by the Israeli government. The BBC might repeat that you're a terrorist, but in international law, it's pretty unclear whether or not you're a terrorist, right? You might be a combatant just as the person you've gone after is a combatant. But that goes about passing, because I suppose the Palestinians don't have representation in such a way that they can sort of make the BBC change their mind on these kind of things.
Michael, it's a classic example of what's called in public relations the electric fence. And the Zionist lobby, that's what it is. There's a lobby, there's an organised lobby with regards to pro-Israel advocacy in the United States. AIPAC, very clear, it's not a conspiracy theory. We should talk about it very clearly and concisely and choose our words, but that's what it is. They have created a litany of organisations whose entire raison d'etre is to effectively shape media discourse. Now, one way they do this is through, like I say, the electric relations, where they make the costs of covering Israel, Palestine in a certain way prohibitive.
А що, і тільки?